Yeah, Rudy Gonzalez, Teamsters 856, co-chair of the San Francisco Labor Council's Resistance and Action Committee.
And what's going on here today?
Well, today, Labor's coming out to support our sisters in the Women's March and in the movement for the Bay Area.
And the Trump administration now, it's a one-year anniversary, we have a shutdown government. Are you surprised that on the anniversary of the administration, the government now is shut down?
I'm sadly not surprised that the shutdown has occurred.
And how are working people, women, workers being affected by the actions of the government?
Well, I think they're being affected by the inactions of the government and the actions of the government. We still have an entire part of our society that is paid 78 cents on the dollar. It's absolutely embarrassing and it's unfortunate, and things need to happen. Things need to change. So I think the inaction is worse than the action. But, we have a president who absolutely has a disregard for immigrants, for women, for people of all classes. And I think it's time that people see that people aren't going to take it anymore. People are going to rise up, people are going to show out in the streets, and they're going to do something about it.
Now, the government shutdown may affect 850,000 workers.
Right.
OSHA, CDC, a lot of critical areas for working people in the public are being affected. How should these workers organize to fight back, and how are working people going to get back to work?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how some of the workers unite, particularly the civilian workers that are contracted with the government, that are misclassified as independent contractors. It'd be great to see them organize and start, associations or committees or unions of their own. But in terms of working people, through their unions, we need to be pushing for grassroots organizing to demand the government to respond to this. We hear about some of the programs, but you often don't hear the human story of actual workers and how their families are impacted. We have people who are essentially going to be working for free. When has that ever been okay?
And the government, the Trump administration, they believe in outsourcing, contracting out. What is the reality of these people that have been outsourced to do public work, really?
Well, outsourcing, we believe, is quitting. We think when a company outsources, they quit on their product, they quit on their customer service, and they quit on their communities that rely on these good jobs. It's a race to the bottom. And a lot of times we only talk about outsourcing in the context of shipping jobs overseas. And we know that, and we know that that's brutal. We've seen United Airlines and a lot of workers and the machinists and the Teamsters lose jobs overseas. But there's also outsourcing in the form of automation. They're outsourcing in the hotel industry. There's outsourcing in the car rental industry. There's a lot of workers who every day, public and private, are facing an automation and a sensationalized tech vibe around a lot of their jobs. But these are good jobs, and there hasn't been a conversation about what's going to happen to our pension systems, to Social Security, to Medicare, to these institutions that were set up as safety nets and require human beings being in these jobs to keep these programs going. So we think outsourcing is an absolute failure on the part of local government when it occurs, and on the part of the federal government when they do it by deregulation.
And the Bay Area is the center of the tech industry, Silicon Valley. The gig economy seems to mean that people aren't going to have regular jobs, aren't going to have Social Security and defined benefits and that kind of thing. What is the future for working people with automation technology, even here in the Bay Area, center of technology?
Well, I think San Francisco has an opportunity because it's the epicenter for a lot of this technology and innovation. You've got a lot of these companies that have started up and called, and they want to call San Francisco their home. They want to attract workers and engineers and coders and such. Well, we have an opportunity that local legislators can set a tone, like San Francisco has for universal health care, like San Francisco has for so many other things like minimum wage and healthcare security ordinance. They have an opportunity to set a tone for protecting good jobs, for putting humans before the robots. I think that's important. Different experts will give you different numbers about what the job loss will look like, but I think any plan that relies on defined benefit plans or Social Security, they're going to have to be talked about. But I think we need to start locally and look at what local elected officials can do to protect our jobs and protect our communities.
And they're talking about automated trucks, automated taxis. Millions of workers may lose their job. Is there concern about that?
There's absolute concern about that. The Teamsters have been forming committees and talking to legislators to try to get ahead of this, but really all unions are trying to get together and come up with some policy positions. A lot of times we get worried about the short-sighted loss and we look at the actual number of jobs. Politicians want us to believe, and some pundits want us to believe that, well, we'll train them for new jobs, but there aren't going to be jobs to retrain them for. We've fallen for that tagline before, and we've seen the failure. We've seen 15,000 jobs at United Airlines go down to 3,000 jobs. And we know that they don't come back. And no matter how much you retrain, some people are at a point in their life where they can't be retrained. They've been doing something for 20 or 30 years. They deserve to retire with dignity. So, we're very concerned about that. And we think unions have a responsibility to organize and set a tone for all working class people and fight back, frankly. We give up to outsourcing and we just assume that it's a given. But if you go to Europe and you go to other places and you talk to groups like the Workers Lab, they'll tell you in some of their opinion polls, places like France don't sensationalize and romanticize the robots and the outsourcing like we do. We need to get back to kind of our values as a society and say we believe people deserve to have dignity when they work and when they retire.
And Betsy DeVos is the Secretary of Education under Trump. She wants to privatize, charterize all schools. How would that affect public education and working people in the United States?
You know, as Teamsters and allied with CSCA and SCIU and other organizations and the California Faculty Association and Teachers Associations, we've seen directly how charter schools will come in and starve local, good neighborhood schools from their funding and divert critical resources. We think that's a race to the bottom, just like outsourcing when they privatize those schools. Public education does need to be worked on, but it needs to be worked on neighborhood and community by community. We need to look at real funding reform, not outsourcing it and privatizing it.
A lot of these charter schools, in fact, none of them I know have service workers who are unionized. They want volunteers to do the cleanup in these schools. I mean, it seems like it'd be the end of unions in public education.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I give credit to UESF, our sisters and brothers there. They've done a bang-up job at trying to actually organize a few charter schools, and they've prevented a lot of them from coming in under the guise of, great school opportunity for people in San Francisco. But, I think Oakland and West Contra Costa school districts are ground zero for this kind of thing. Just one day ago, we saw Rocket Ship get voted out. But these charters, they have a plan. They know if they get beaten locally, they'll go to the county office of Ed, and then they'll try to go to the state. So we've got to organize on a regional level.
Well, Governor Brown has supported charter schools. He has 2 of them in Oakland, military charter schools. The State Board of Education has approved charters which have been opposed by local communities and county school districts. What do you plan to do? What should be done about the fact that it seems like these agencies do oversight have actually been taken over by charter privatizers?
I think the answer is we have to think regionally and statewide to some of our issues. All too often in San Francisco and other communities, we're thinking about our next election cycle, our local legislative priorities. But these issues like housing, minimum wage, healthcare, these are regional issues, as is the charter school issue. We've got to organize in a new way and get more members involved to actually tackle this on a statewide basis.
And a lot of workers can't afford to live in the Bay Area. They can't afford to live in San Francisco. You have to be a millionaire or very wealthy to even buy a house. What is that going to mean for the future of working people in the Bay Area?
The housing crisis is probably the number one issue labor faces right now. All the gains and through struggle that we get in our contracts go to commute costs and to housing costs. You look at anywhere that's barterable these days, Concord is the next housing crisis epicenter. It's brutal. We have to look at community development agreements. We've got to get responsible developers to come in and actually provide true affordable housing. And we've also got to look at locally what we can legislate. But, in the end, I think we've got to find elected officials who are going to actually hold developers' feet to the fire, right? And work with them, bring them to the table, do things like project labor agreements, do things like, negotiate responsible AMI levels and banding so that middle-income people can actually afford housing in the area. But it's a comprehensive solution. Housing is one of those things that you can't just fix in San Francisco because San Mateo County is also impacted by it. A lot of our workforce in the Teamsters come from the East Bay. Now they're coming from Vacaville and
Solano
County.
2 or 3 hours on the road.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And there's a toll that takes on neighborhoods. People don't have time to be civically involved in their neighborhoods or their kids' school or the next charter school that's coming in, when they're spending 4 hours on the road.